Welcome everybody to the Understanding Financial Aid presentation. My name is Veena Rao. I am an independent educational consultant here in Valencia. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am an attorney. I used to work with adults and children with disabilities to try and make sure that they had access to educational and mental health services. I worked in Michigan until 2010, and then my family relocated to China for 7 years. It was supposed to be a 2-year assignment, but turned into 7. My son graduated from high school while we were still living in Shanghai, and my daughter started 11th grade at Valencia High School. So it's during that time that I got deeper and deeper into understanding the college admissions process, because I wanted to help her develop a college list that was appropriate to meet her needs, and try and understand what the universities were looking for and help her understand their essay requirements and things along those lines. So after shepherding her through the college admissions process, I decided to go and get formally trained in the field. I wanted to make sure that I would be a resource to people in the community and be able to start working with students here to help them navigate high school and the college admissions process. So I work with kids grades 9 through 12 and help them in their college search, as well as college essay writing process, and then, help them through the application process itself. So in terms of today's presentation, we're going to be covering a few different topics, and I'll sort of outline that for you. So we're going to be covering topics like what is the cost of attendance and why it's important to look at that particular figure. What are the types of financial aid that students are awarded? What is the FAFSA and what is the CSS profile? So those are the two financial aid applications that colleges and universities require in order to be able to offer financial aid. So we will cover both those applications. So in terms of cost of attendance, this is a figure that you will find at every university website. And so it basically tells you what it costs to attend that particular school. So it comprises of like 5 different factors that they've calculated and deemed to be their cost of attendance. So you're looking at tuition and fees, housing and dining costs, the cost of books and supplies, the cost of transportation, personal expenses. All of those 5 figures end up becoming the cost of attendance at a university. A few of these are fixed costs, meaning that there's nothing we can do to change them, but a few of them do change over the course of the first through the 4th year. So in terms of tuition and fees, we're looking at, if you look at a private university, it doesn't really matter whether you are in-state or out-of-state. The tuition cost is the same for everyone. For a public university, it does matter whether you're in or out of state. So that, and even in California, there's a difference between the CSU price tag and that of the UCs. And then one of the benefits that California students have is that we're part of the Western Undergraduate Exchange. So, which I will cover that a little bit further, but you are able to get a discount on tuition at these WUI schools, as we call them. So in terms of housing and dining, we're looking at obviously the cost of, and it's usually listed as room and board as well, but you're looking at the cost of staying on campus in the first 1 to 2 years, depending on the university. Some of them say it's a 2-year stay, some allow you to leave campus after 1 year. But it's the average cost of on-campus housing that's listed. And then the cost of dining is the average cost of a meal plan on campus. So these are the costs that, depending on the size of the room you pick, it might vary from the figure that they've given, because they do offer, most universities have the ability to choose what type of room you want. Meal plan again covers the cost of you getting food in their dining halls, but depending on when you're able to move off campus, the cost of housing will change, as will the cost of food, because it is definitely cheaper to buy food and cook it yourself rather than trying to get on a meal plan at the university. But in terms of housing costs, one of the things that even if you move off campus, you do have to factor in the thing that housing on campus housing is a 10-month period, whereas off campus housing you're paying for a lease for the entire year. So you do have to consider those factors. In terms of the cost of books and supplies, it's a general figure, but it usually includes books and the purchase of laptops, perhaps mobile phones, things along those lines are incorporated into that books and supplies cost. But one of the things that you have to look at is whether or not they'll need the textbooks. Sometimes the professors at the first lesson will tell students, you may not need the textbook. You have the ability, even if you need it, you have the ability to get an e-textbook or for a much cheaper price, or even getting used textbooks. So there are plenty of options that students can choose from. The next figure obviously we're looking at is a cost of transportation. So transportation is a cost of, if you're commuting, then obviously it's the cost that you have to figure in for driving back and forth and parking, for instance. But if you have to drive further distances, they're trying to give you a rough figure for that, as well as if you have to fly, across the country or to another location to be able to start school. So this one is, again, a malleable cost, because it could be that, the figure might only include one trip each semester back and forth, whereas you might want to factor in you attending the first parents' weekend at the school, or having your child come back home for holidays or something. So it, again, could be an expense that, could change depending on how it is you address this particular factor. Personal expenses, again, these are above and beyond all of the other factors we've already discussed. These are the expenses, for going to Starbucks, going out for a meal, purchasing tickets for a play, or even, football game tickets or something. So whatever it is that, constitute personal expenses, this is an expense that you can obviously control. It could be higher than the figure that they're offering, or it could be a lot lower. So it just depends on how students and families budget for their personal expenses. So this is sort of the average cost of attending California schools and private universities. And obviously some of these figures are a little bit lower than normal, because I think some of the universities, by the time you factor in all the costs, it could be a lot higher. But this is a figure that's put out by RAC, and they've come up with this figure that this is the average cost of attendance for a California resident. But in terms of the Western Undergraduate Exchange, it's 14 states across the western half of the United States that offer a tuition discount for California students. So they have an agreement in place that students can attend 2- or 4-year universities across any of these states, and there are programs within it and universities that will offer a WUI tuition discount to all students who apply. Or but there are programs sometimes, since, for instance, competitive programs like nursing, engineering, that are not open for a WUI tuition discount at some schools. Some schools, it doesn't matter what you want to major in, they will offer you the discount anyway. And so the WUI tuition discount, in some cases, works out to be a lot cheaper than attending even a California in-state university, because the cost of education at some of these Western universities is lower because of their location, for instance. So, and one of the neat things about this is, if you have a student with a good GPA, they have the ability to stack on scholarships on top of the tuition discount itself. So for instance, at some of these schools, a 3.2 GPA will get you a scholarship that will reduce the cost of of attendance, even lower than the WUI tuition rate that they're already offering. But you need to go obviously to the website, reach out to the universities that you may be interested in, and find out how many WUI tuition discounts are available for applicants and how competitive that pool might be. But it's definitely worth it to look at these universities to see if they have similar offerings to what it is you're considering. So in terms of the aid that's awarded, there are obviously three types. One being free aid that comes in the form of scholarships and grants, earned aid awards, which is federal work-study grants, and then borrowed money, which comes in the form of loans. So we'll discuss each of that now specifically. But in terms of aid, we're looking at, for instance, merit-based aid. So merit-based aid is usually given for students with strong academic records or because they have specific talents that the university is looking for, perhaps athletes, musicians, students along that line. And at most universities, when you apply for merit-based aid, it is automatically part of the application process. I'll discuss this a little bit further in the next slide, but merit-based aid is, again, it's institutional aid that the university is using their own funds to grant scholarships to students, and then the next form of aid comes in the form of need-based aid, which is granted as a result of FAFSA. So it could be federal aid as well as institutional aid that comes in the form of need-based grants. And definitely you could have a combination of merit and need-based awards that are given to students, meaning that they're stacked one on top of the other. So in terms of the free money, again, universities have money that they've set aside to grant for scholarships. And so it could be just a university award, and sometimes it ends up being specific departments at the university have award money as well that they want to hand out. So it could come in the form of scholarships in that way. As I said earlier, for some universities, the application for admission itself is enough to have all students be considered for merit-based awards. But for some universities, it is an additional step, meaning you have to apply to them and then they have a separate application process for merit-based awards. So it's important that you check at each university website. And for some of them, yes, you're automatically considered for aid as soon as you apply, but then they have other applications that for scholarships that you will have to still fill out and do additional essays for. For instance, USC has something called the Town and Gown scholarships. Well, that's a separate application process with its own set of essays that you have to do if you want to be considered for those awards. Tulane has something similar. You're automatically considered for merit-based awards with your admissions application, but then they have other scholarships that they offer students that require students to fill out essays or pop up videos and things like that. So it's important that you check at each university website. You also have the ability to get scholarships from local civic organizations, religious organizations. Perhaps your churches have scholarships that you could apply to. Check with your employers because they may have scholarships that employees' children can apply for. But the neat thing about this obviously is none of this has to be repaid. The only thing that you have to be cognizant of is if the award is for 1 school year or if it's for 4. And if it's for 4, what are the conditions that are placed on the award in order for it to continue on for 4 years. So that is something that you will have to factor in when you're looking at the final award letter. There are also websites where students can go in and sign up to get scholarships and apply. But the thing is, this is another one of those things where students have to be careful about trying to balance obviously the demands of the application process with respect to their college applications, the essays they have to write, and then trying to do the work for these scholarships as well that are available on these websites. the money varies from organization to organization that's listed there, but a lot of them do have additional steps that students need to complete. So they just need to figure out how to balance their time and energy in their scholarship search. But be aware of the fact that you should not have to pay for a scholarship in order to, be eligible for anything. And one of the things I'd recommend is that students look for local scholarships, because then the pool of candidates becomes smaller, and then you have a better shot of getting scholarship offers. And in terms of free money that is granted, there are grants that come in the form of federal grants, which are listed here. And then the state also has grant funding that's available. And there are also institutional grants, meaning that the colleges or universities you're applying to have pools of money that they grant to students. So again, none of this has to be repaid, but obviously even in terms of the federal grants, it's the FAFSA that determines whether or not you're eligible, because they're looking at what your ability to pay for the college education looks like, and then whether your income levels and stuff qualify you for any of these federal grants. So in terms of the Cal grants, the FAFSA, you can just file the FAFSA and then have that be the tool that determines whether or not you're eligible for Cal grants. But this is one of those that, although there are different types of grants, a student is only eligible for one grant at a time. And the amount of money that's paid, for instance, under Cal Grant A, depends on the kind of school that your student is attending, meaning that they have a different figure for the CSUs, the Cal State, with the UCs, and then private universities. And it has a GPA requirement in the first year as well as in the subsequent years. Cal Grant B is an award that is, they just reduced it from 1670s to 1656. So that's the award that is given in the first year, if that's the only award that you qualify for. But in the subsequent years, it's possible that you end up getting a Cal Grant award that is a combination of Cal Grant A and Cal Grant B, meaning that they'll add the money that you're entitled to for the type of university that you're attending, and then they'll tack on the extra 1,656. But you have the ability to, again, get aid depending on the type of university that you're attending in California. But the information is all available on the state's website, and I'll provide you a link to that after this presentation. So in terms of money that students can earn, you're looking at work study jobs. So this would be, if a student qualifies for work study, it'll be listed in your award letter. And then what happens is that the student will get to campus and then have to apply for a job that is considered deemed a work study job. So most universities will probably have a work study fair, so the students can go in and check out what kind of opportunities are available and then be able to apply and get that job. In this particular, during this pandemic, there are a lot of students who qualified for work study jobs and had to go home as a result of what was happening at the university, but the universities continued to pay the students their work study funding because it was already money that was, deemed to be the students' aid as part of the students' aid package. But there are also jobs that students can go and get on campus that are not need-based jobs. Universities usually have tons of jobs that are available that students can apply for because they would rather offer the students the opportunity to earn money, and so it's a great thing for students to be able to find things that are of interest to them while they're trying to study on campus as well. The students also have the opportunity to apply for grant funding at their universities for instance, research work that they're doing. So students should not overlook that opportunity when they get to campus, that if you're trying to do research, look to see if there's grant funding available that you can apply for and then be paid for the research work that you're doing to further your career. So in terms of borrowed money, this is also part of the award letter that you will get after you get an admissions offer from a university. So the loans obviously all have to be repaid. It is repaid with interest. And there are different sources of loans: federal loans, private loans, and institutional loans. And we'll discuss that further in a few minutes. Federal loans tend to have obviously lower fixed interest rates, and they have flexible repayment options. And that's why they're the most desirable type of loans for students and families to get. In terms of the most popular federal loans that are there, it's the direct subsidized loan. This is the one that obviously everyone would want to get, because it is meant for undergraduate students, but it's the Department of Education that pays the interest while you're at university. So what does that mean? It means that, you know, during the 4 years or 6 years, depending on how long you take to graduate, but hopefully it's just 4, depending on how long you're at university, the Department of Education pays the interest while you're at school. So that's one less headache that you have to worry about. The direct unsubsidized loan, undergraduate and graduate students are able to apply and get this. And the borrower is responsible for the interest from the moment the money is taken out. You're responsible for the interest throughout your 4 years of university. So if it's possible, try and pay that interest off, you know, while you're in school, so that you don't have to roll it over into the cost of borrowing. So you do have the option of deferring that interest rate and start paying it upon graduation, but it's recommended that you at least try and make those interest payments while you're still in school, so that you're not going to add on to the loan amount later. The Federal Direct Plus loan is a loan that parents can apply for. The other 2 loans were loans, obviously, that students could apply for, and that the loan is in the student's name. But this one is a loan that parents can take out. It's not, it's slightly a dangerous proposition, because parents can borrow up to the entire cost of education. Which is really a lot of money, depending on where it is the student is applying to go. So, you know, I would caution obviously against that sort of borrowing. But the other part of it is obviously you're responsible for all the interest during the life of this loan. And in order to qualify, they are looking at the credit worthiness of the parent before they grant these particular loans. The other types of loans that are available, some of the institutions offer their own loan programs, so that, you know, they offer students the ability to borrow money and then repay them on the, you know, on the terms that they've set for borrowing. But again, it's entirely dependent on the university's largesse. I mean, they don't have to grant it to everyone, and they may not even have those options available. The other really expensive borrowing option obviously is the private lenders, meaning, you know, your banks offering you loans to be able to pay for education. Again, you have to be aware of the costs of borrowing and how much it'll ultimately cost you to have, you know, taken out money to pay for education. One of the things that parents have to calculate is their expected family contribution. So when they're looking at the expected family contribution, it is a term that's used that incorporates what the parent will be able to pay towards their child's education, as well as the student's contribution. So in terms of parents, they're looking obviously at your income, your you know, your other assets that you have. If they're looking at the student income, they're looking student contribution, they're looking at whether or not the student has 529 plans, other bank balances that they have, if they have you know, money that's in a trust somewhere. Those are all the things that are taken into consideration to come up with the expected family contribution. So why is that a significant figure? Because your financial need, meaning the amount that this university has to figure out how they're going to meet, using all these different forms of funding that we just talked about, the loans, the work study, as well as the grant funding, will be determined because of the figure that's going to be generated, which will be your financial need. So the financial need is determined based on the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution. So you should, one of the things that we should be able to figure out is, what is your expected family contribution before you even start applying to universities? Well, how do you do that? You do that by going to the net price calculator at each of the universities that your child is going to be applying to. So it's a calculator that's available on the financial aid website of each university. And it asks you for data to input, and then at the end, it'll give you an estimate of what your financial need at that university will be. Because what it'll take into account is what the parents and students are expected to pay. That's your expected family contribution. And then it's going to look to see what kind of scholarships, grants, and loans, because again, the aid could come in the form of loans, you might be eligible for. So what I'd urge parents to do is to go and visit a few different universities to try and, again, do that net price, use that net price calculator to figure out what your estimated financial need will be, what your net price that you're going to pay towards that university is going to be. Again, it's an estimate, so it could be higher or lower than what it is you'll ultimately end up getting, but make sure you enter all the data that they're requesting accurately so that you can get a good understanding of what it is you're going to be expected to pay towards the cost of your child's education. And I know that families, have budgets in mind of what they think they can afford, but, definitely expect universities to push you higher, meaning that, you may think I'll be able to afford, for just as an example, $1,200 per month towards my child's education. Well, they may say you may need to come up with $1,500. Just as a rough idea. So, just understand that whatever these things you're getting are estimates, but at least you would have some idea of what it is you're going to be looking at in terms of each university. How do you apply for financial aid then? Well, you go to the FAFSA.gov website and then start an application for federal student aid. And the applications open October 1st. So don't do anything right now. You should start the application only on October 1st. You have the ability to send the report that's generated, but once you're done with the application, to 10 schools. And then you can always go back in and send it to more, but at least 10 schools will get your financial aid application when you fill out the FAFSA, as long as you list them in that first go. And then students will respond, will get responses to their application from universities. So they need to make sure that they're going to be checking their website, their email portals and their university portals. And you can submit the FAFSA for up to 6 years, assuming that you didn't finish in 4. So in terms of like what the FAFSA takes into account, it's going to take a look at the student's demographic information. It'll list, obviously, you'll be listing the 10 universities that will receive the FAFSA application information. Students have the ability to go in and review their dependency status. If you are paying for your student for the next few years, you're paying their expenses, all of that, they are your dependents. But there are certain students, depending on the questions that they answer, could be deemed independent of their parents. These are the students who are in the foster care system, students, people in the military, veterans. If your child is married, then they could be considered an independent from their parents. So the dependency questions are a part of the FAFSA application. They're also looking for parent information. Obviously, whether your parents married, living together, you're not married, but still parents living together. step parent information might go in there. So they're collecting information about the parents themselves, and they're also going to ask for parent and student financial information. And then there's obviously a component where you sign and submit the application itself. So in terms of what the FAFSA requires, one of the first steps that parents and students need to do is to go in and obtain a federal student aid ID. So the FSA ID, each of you needs to have your own email address, each parent and the student, all separate email addresses. And then, you would use your social security number. If you're not an American citizen, then you would use your alien registration number. If you're undocumented, you shouldn't file the FAFSA. So in terms of the information, that's the first step. Each of you needs your FSA ID before you go in and start the application process itself. And then in the application, you have the ability to roll in financial information. So for seniors applying for the fall of 2021, you are entering information based on your 2019 taxes. So that's what you have to keep in mind. What they're looking for is 2019 tax information. And so you have the ability to import all the IRS file data that you've submitted to the IRS directly into the application, and it populates all of those fields for you. So you don't have to go in and hand write anything. But in terms of information that's being requested, they're obviously looking for your W-2 information. They're looking for untaxed income information as well, child support that you've received, any interest income that you've made. For veterans, they're looking for non-educational benefits that you've received. If you obviously have bank accounts, they want to have that information, investment information. If you have a business or a farm, there are limitations obviously on like if you're a business that employs less than 100 people, they're not going to be collecting that information. But they need to know what is at your disposal, what income and assets you have, so that they can then determine what your aid will be. But again, it's 2019 data. So it's, whatever year you're applying for admission, you're going back 2 years to enter that two-year back data into the FAFSA itself. So what happens if your circumstances have changed? Since 2019? Well, there's a question on the FAFSA that allows parents who may have had a job loss to report that on the application itself. It's question number 83. And on the CSS profile, there's a box where parents can just go in and fill out any explanation they have for any of the circumstances that, in the application itself. So that's the free-for-all box that's there on the CSS profile. If your marital status has changed, it'll obviously affect the income information that's going in. But when you start the application, and there are also guides on the FAFSA website that you can access to understand how to input all of this information. And one of the neat things about this whole application process is, as you move from box to box to try and fill it out, there's always a tab on the side that explains what you're being asked to fill out. So they have a guide in the application itself that you can turn to, but they also have guides outside the application that you can take a look at to help you answer any of the questions that may come up while you're doing the application. And in terms of changed circumstances, I would definitely urge families to contact the financial aid office via phone and email to explain what has changed, and ask them, what kind of documentation do I have to provide to be able to help you understand my change in circumstances since the 2019 information you've requested. So definitely reach out, because during this time, colleges and universities understand that a lot of people have been affected by the changes in the economy and things. So definitely do that. So in terms of filling out the parent application, there's a figure that explains what data parents have to share. So if you're married, then the information of both parents come into the FAFSA. It has to be reported. Even if you're not married, but you're living together, both parents' information has to come in. If you are divorced, they're asking the student to put in the information about the parent they spend the most amount of time with over the last 12 months. But remember that you still have to report the financial support that you've gotten from the other parent in this particular application. And then if your parent has remarried, then your step parent has information also comes in to the FAFSA itself. But take a look at all of this information on the FAFSA website to understand how it works. In terms of the process itself, once you complete the FAFSA and then list all the colleges and submit the application, it is processed, and then the universities that you listed will get a copy of the report that contains all the data that you've put in to the system itself. And the student will also get a copy of the report, and it's called the Student Aid Report. And it'll tell you, explain what kind of aid you might be entitled to at the universities. In terms of, as I said, it's important that when students start their application process with the colleges and universities, set up an email account that'll be the one receptacle where all the communications from the universities will come in. So that, and this is the email that they will check continuously. They need to not only check the emails to see if there are any updates, but then go to the portals that they're required to set up at each of the universities to check to see if there's anything that needs to be updated for the application process. One of the things, sorry, I should have backtracked a little bit. Every year, there are about 20% to 25% of applicants who are chosen for verification. So it's a random group of parents and students that are picked, and they're asked to verify the data that they've put into their FAFSA application. So that's one part of it. And then sometimes the universities want just a little bit more information about what you've listed in the FAFSA to be able to determine what your financial aid package will look like. So that's the reason why it's important that you fill out and complete this application as soon as possible. And if there are missing documents, that the student might have to go in and submit that to the university. And then it's important that all of this get done in a timely manner so that you are able to see your financial aid award as soon as you get your offer of admissions. And this is especially important for students who are applying early action or early decision, that you try and get in your FAFSA as close to the October 1st deadline, as close to October 1 as possible. And in terms of the FAFSA, there's a demo site on their website, so you can go in and input your own information, or just check out using one of their demo models below to see how the whole process works. And again, when you are checking with the universities and on the university website, understand what their priority deadline is for sending in the FAFSA, meaning that October 1, the application's open. Some universities want all of that information by the middle of December. Some have it at February. But whatever it is, you need to know what that deadline that the university expects your financial aid information to come in. The reason being that, after that deadline, say it was December 1 and you applied in January, you might have financial need, but the university may not have the ability to grant it to you in that amount that you wanted, because they've already like started giving out aid awards to other people. So it's important that the application for financial aid, the FAFSA, go in as early as possible, so that your aid is not hindered because the application was submitted later than what the university had set as a deadline for your application to come in. So the other option, if you don't want to go through the FAFSA forecaster, is that there's a worksheet as well that you can fill out. And again, I'll send you all the links in the handout that I will send in a few, with this presentation. And in terms of so the other application for financial aid that certain universities require is the CSS profile. So the FAFSA is the application you fill to receive federal grants, loans, and work study, and other types of federal assistance in the form of, say, in California, Cal Grants and stuff. But at most universities, the FAFSA information also functions as the conduit for the institution to give you institutional aid. But there are about 400 colleges and universities that require you to fill out the CSS profile. It's a paid application, but the aid that they're awarding is their institutional aid, meaning that they have money that they've set aside that they want to award, but then they have a more rigorous application that parents have to fulfill in order to qualify for that. But again, the CSS profile is for non-federal aid, and it's only at about 400 institutions that's required. So when have your student check to find out if the universities that they're applying to require the CSS profile. This particular application is on the College Board's website. So these are the same people who do the SATs and AP exams. The application is on their website. And you can also just go in and check that website to figure out if any of the universities that your child is applying to is on the list. So in terms of the CSS profile, what is different about it? Well, the FAFSA only requires you to submit information about 1 year's worth of tax returns. The CSS profile asks you for 2 years worth of filings. And one of the things that they're also looking at, in addition to all the asset information that they're asking for, in addition, they're looking for information about whether or not one of the children is attending, other children is attending a private school in terms of K through 12. Do you have assets that are in the siblings' names? They're looking at all of your business information as well. So the FAFSA had that limit about, you need to report business income if it has over 100 employees in it. Whereas the CSS profile, if you have a farm, if you have a business, all of it is put in to the application. But one of the most controversial parts of this application is the fact that they look at the equity in your home. So, and what they do with that figure depends on university to university. So it varies between 1.2% to 1.2 to 2 times your family income may be looked at in terms of home equity. But you have the ability to, again, reach out to the financial aid offices at the universities that you're applying to be able to explain that. But the other part of the application that allows some grace, is the fact that they allow you to discuss your financial situation with them. If you have debt, if you've got medical expenses that you're paying, if you have not been able to save money towards your retirement, that's a place where you can discuss that information and say, because they do ask for information about your retirement savings, but if you've not saved enough, they're going to take that into consideration. They're obviously looking at the parent's age as well when they look at the retirement savings. So, these are all the requirements of that CSS profile. But again, it's for institutional aid that you're looking to get. And that's what this particular thing covers. So in terms of both the applications, both of them open on October 1. It's important, as I said before, to track your university deadlines, but I'd urge you to file both applications as close to October 1 as possible, so that if there are any kinks in the system, meaning that, if you've got to provide documentation, if you're chosen for verification, you're able to get through all those hurdles, and that, you're done with the financial aid application. And, it's a relief. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And look out for further webinar offerings from me, and definitely visit my website for any blogs that I've posted, and feel free to contact me as a resource whenever you are in need of assistance. I look forward to hearing from you. All the best. Take care.